What's going on, guys? It's your boy Beats by Ash coming at you with another banger video, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my blue purple crocodile deck that I've been playing with non-stop since the release of Starter Deck 5 Film Edition. Now, I want to start off with a story. So when I was first introduced to the game, this was actually the first deck that I purchased. I saw a video online about it, and coming from Yu-Gi-Oh, I really enjoyed the fact that you're able to generate so much card advantage with this leader. If you're new to this leader, the effect says if we have 4 or less cards in our hand, don 1x. When an event is activated, draw 1 card. This can be used during our turn or our opponent's turn. I was naturally attracted to this, and I really like control decks, so I got the deck, and I thought, this is like a decent deck, right? Turns out, no. This is a completely rogue, anti-meta pick that you have to have an extensive amount of knowledge of fundamentals in the game, or you are just going to completely crap the bag. And that's exactly what happened. I played in my first tournament ever using blue-purple Croc at that, and I got destroyed. And that really made me just kind of feel bad about playing the deck. I just kind of thought about it. I was like, really, you have to play perfectly with the deck to actually feel like your play is being rewarding. As a new player to Bandai games in general, I hadn't really had like the same, processing speed as I do now. So I took a huge break from the deck. After coming back to it, even before the release of this starter deck, I started to understand how powerful this deck can be and how rewarding it is if you are able to play perfectly as well as playing fast. Because I want to put this out there that this is not a good deck to first time play in the tournament, because you are going to be slow, you're not going to have a high enough process speed to get through your plays, and eventually you're probably going to get in trouble for slow playing. So that's why I have been practicing quite a bit versus my friends and versus online before getting into any big tournaments. And I'm hoping to get out some live stream of some tournaments with this deck soon, just to showcase for you guys, kind of give you my thought process, because I don't really see a lot of content out there telling you exactly like how you should go into each matchup with this deck, what the mulligan guide is, or many other details like that. So if there are any specifics you would like to know about the deck, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and I will try to address that in a future video. Now, I want to talk about what are the advantages of playing this deck. Another person told me on a live stream quite a bit ago that the reason why Law is definitively the only successful 2-color leader currently is because when you have 4 life, it's not such a disadvantage that you have a less life. It's just a huge disadvantage that you are getting 1 less card added to your hand throughout the game. So you're always starting at a -1 in card advantage versus a 5 life leader. So what does Law's leader ability allow him to do? It allows him to draw a card essentially. So that overcomes the ability to only have 4 life, only have 4 cards added to your hand. And when you think about what our leader is trying to do, we're essentially trying to do the same thing, and in some ways better. So that's why I think this has a lot of potential, but it is very complicated through the deck building process as well as, in-person play. So I think a lot of people have just given up on it, but I think there are also a lot of other people who are looking to understand the ins and out of it. And I think that the deck is very unsolved right now, but I think the direction I've taken with the deck is quite a bit different than most people. I wanted to share that with you guys because I have been seeing success with the deck. I love to come out with these meta-breaking strategies to experience the game on another level. And personally, if this was a legal contender for the Treasure Cup, I would be bringing this deck because I think it is insane. So we talk about the matchups here. The deck is very strong versus any solo red leader. So Luffy or Zoro deck is amazing. Versus Law, I would say it's at least a 50-50, but I would consider my build more in favor versus the Law player, just because my deck is a little bit more angled towards that matchup. And versus Green, previously the reason not to play this deck was because Green, you just could never win. your deck is too slow to establish a board. So eventually they're gonna put the 8-cost kid on the field, and then you just cry and you pack up your stuff. So I thought before, why would I not just play Doflamingo? Because it has the same exact, losing matchups, except at least if you get ahead on board early, you don't automatically lose in that matchup. Well, now with these new cards, we're able to bypass that aspect of the matchup completely. So I would say now the matchup is at least a 50-50, but more so in favor of me because the way that I have structured the deck and the direction I'm going. And then I would say versus Kaido, this is the best possible deck you could play versus Kaido. So if your locals is a lot of Kaido, this is a great pick. Blue is a very difficult matchup if they get Boa Hancock, because that card essentially makes it to where your leader has a vanilla ability, because they're doing the same thing as your leader every turn without having to commit any cards to gain that advantage. They're just doing that with their Boa, and then their leader ability gives them free advantage on top of that. So they're getting a +2 every turn, you're getting a +1. Okay, so to start off, I do want to mention that I am going blind second, which means in every matchup, I am always choosing to go second no matter what. And the more I play the deck, the more I understand it. I don't understand how you could even win going first with the direction the build is going. Half the time when you go first, you have no turn 2 play, and then you just skipped your turn 1 and turn 2, and you're already a 4-life leader that's extremely slow in the early game, so you just automatically lose. And some of the videos I've seen online where people are playing matches and they won, it was never because they chose to go second. It was because the other guy ended up winning the die roll, and then they made the Blurple Croc player go second, and it just worked in their favor. So I have completely built the deck around going second because our curve is completely amazing that way. And another thing I want to mention is your leader inherently requires 1 Dawn. Sometime before turn 10, because we don't have a lot of pressure to apply in the early game, we're going to have to use a minus Dawn effect. So when you're going first and you use a minus Dawn effect, that means you're essentially behind by 2 Dawn until you both get to 10. That it just puts immediate urgency on you to protect yourself and honestly results in a lot of losses. So it makes sense when you think about what we're trying to do, how beneficial it is to go second. So first off, I play 4 Law Blocker, and this is pretty much the only turn 1 play besides our Baroque Works. Card is very strong, lets you be as efficient as possible with your Dawn. I think it's a staple in every blue deck. Now for the turn 2 plays, because we're going second, we have 4 Miss All Sunday, best card in the deck. Card is literally just so crazy. This card just ends up being a +2, a +1 every single time, and it's searchable off of our Baroque Works searcher. One thing I do want to mention is I like having a very high Baroque Works package count, because later in the game, if your opponent uses their last attacker and they don't have rush in their deck, you can block with the Miss All Sunday, and instead of adding back the Love Beam, you'll add back a Baroque Works, and then on your turn, you're just gonna Pot of Greed because you'll be drawing 2. So I think this card is just beyond broken. I think going forward, it just becomes better because you can return any event, not just blue. Now, these are the real turn 2 MVPs. I'm playing 3 Teach and 4 Uta. This card is literally insane. It's actually just the whole reason that you want to play this deck, because essentially if you play this on turn 2 and you play a 5-cost 6k blocker on turn 3, it's just so polarizing for the other guy to be able to win. You've just got so much tempo, and you're really never attacking with this until you establish a board, because in a vacuum, you can think that this essentially accounts for 2 blocks on 1 card, and later in the game when we can afford to play events, we can block with this, and we'll let's say we have a Blast Breath and we make this 9, negate their attack. Okay, I'll tap your Trafalgar Law, and then I'm just gonna get to attack it next turn. So it's just insane. It just slows the other guy down so much, and Teach is just necessary because it allows us to bounce back our opponent's turn 2 Nico Robin as well as Okiku or other problem cards, and it just allows us to establish a natural attacker. That's something that's very important to understand, is that this deck is very low on an ability to attach Dawn to your characters. So this card has an impact on the board and it allows us to establish an attacker, which can kill their searchers, can kill their green cards like their Nekamamushi or their Izo if we top them with this. So these have like really insane synergy. I did the math. Going second, by turn 2, our chances to draw a 4-drop are 68% chance or 73% chance if we choose to take the damage. So that's very important to know, because if you have one of these on turn 2, you're probably going to win the game. And every time I read this card and play it, it just becomes more and more powerful. So that's it for the turn 2 plays. Now, this is the heart and soul of the deck. The whole reason to play the deck, honestly, other than Uta, is 4 Queen, 2 Croc. If you haven't been living under a rock, 5 cost 6k blockers are the best thing in the game. Personally, I think this is the best card in the game, and our ability to also play this card just makes this deck the best control deck, because when you think about it, the reason 5 cost 6k blockers are the best stat line in the game is because on the turn that we play these cards, we're pretty much guaranteed to stop an attack, or our opponent just chooses not to attack because we have a free blocker. And considering my deck has so many 2Ks and events, if we block with this, then we can just discard only 1 card in response to a 7k attack. And that's insane when all we're trying to do is fend off of our life total in the early game. If we play this down on turn 3, for example, this card is going to be a free blocker like I just mentioned. Now, on top of that, we are going to probably discard a card with no counter in hand off of the effect, and most likely draw at least 1 2k, if not 2 cards that also have counter. So that means this is guaranteed to survive based on its own effect, and not even on any other cards in your hand. And then on the following turn, every turn after that, you only have to put 1 Dawn on this to make this a 7k attacker. And what did I say before was the one weakness of this deck? It's the ability to not have any Dawn remaining to create attackers on your field. So by only having to allocate 1 Dawn on this, that is just so beyond insane in this deck, because it's the only way you're going to get through with damage. And Crocodile is a card that's extremely slept on. I see people removing this or even cutting it down, and you need to see one of these cards by turn 3, and this card is searchable by Baroque Works. Also, this card is insane versus green, insane versus law. It puts back their searchers. I honestly would say that you cannot cut this down at all, even with the addition of new cards. Even though it has no counter, you need to see these. If you take the damage by turn 3, you're going to have an 82% chance to draw one of these or a Baroque Works, which can search this. And if you don't take the damage, then it's a 78% chance for you to have one of these. And this is not accounting the mulligan. My previous statistic was not accounting the mulligan either. So we're basically guaranteed to have this curve out in our deck. And honestly, if you have turn 2 Uta into turn 3 Queen, you win the game, and the other guy will not be able to come back. Now for our win condition, for Croc, probably my favorite card in the game, this card says if you put it down and you don't die, you get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not going to talk too much about it, but if you get this on the board unanswered, you probably just win because all of your cards are free. And Banish is just a busted ability because we can just play for board with all our other characters. We're essentially just getting a free damage unanswered every turn. The new addition of the deck, Douglas Bullet. Literally one of the best cards in the game right now, man. So I've seen people play 3 of this. I've seen people play 4. I honestly just don't think you can warrant putting in 3. I tried it. It's a card with no counter. If you draw too many cards with no counter in the early game, you pretty much just lose because they're forcing you to take damage, and then you're never getting down to 4 or less cards to get value off our leader. So if you end up taking the damage in the early game, your leader just becomes a vanilla leader and you're at 4 life. So you're 100% going to lose. This card can be used on the turn it's played. Let's say you have like Croc on board or Queen plus Uta. Then what you can do is you can play Douglas on the board, then use the minus effect. Even though he can't attack himself, I can then just swing with my Queen, swing with my Croc on the same turn it's played, and that can allow you to get rid of like key searchers like Bonnie. Like if they have a Trafalgar Law, you just remove it. You have this, and you have this to attack with. and you don't really care about the Dawn reduction because you're clearing the board. You're gonna have a 10k attacker next turn, and you probably have way more cards in them than them in hand. And in some matchups, you can just straight up use this ability to kill without doing anything else. So when set 2 comes out, if you're playing against Ivankov, they're always going to have 2 or 0 cards in hand, which means this is just always a double attack, and you can just straight up only kill with this. So before we even had this card, there was no kill potential in the deck. We were only winning by playing for the board. So this card just adds so many levels to the game. On to the 2Ks. 4 Mr. Bond, 4 X-Drake, 2 Mihawk. Only 2 Mihawk because this is just a fake card. It has no effect, but 2Ks are extremely important in the deck because it allows us to reduce our hand size, and we have so many 6K blockers that it's just a 1 card discard to block a 7K. And this card you may actually use. So sometimes you might want to put this down on turn 2, just because it can search for your Desert Spot or your Baroque Works. It's like the only real card, but overall, I think this card is amazing. If we get any more Baroque Works, it just becomes better. Now, on to the event package. I decided to play 2 Baroque Works standard, 4 Desert Spada. So there's a total of 18 Baroque Work cards in the deck, which means if you use this on turn 1, it is a 93% chance for you to hit with this surge effect, and that's not including you having any other Baroque Work cards in hand. Let's say you draw an additional Baroque Works card, that chance decreases to 91%. So this card pretty much never misses, but you need to take note in the late game, how many Spadas do you have engraved, how many Missile Sunday do you have engraved, because in the late game you could miss with this if you've reused it multiple times. And it's just important to remember what information you've gathered, because ultimately that's going to be the deciding factor between you winning or losing. For Love Beam, probably the current best event in the game. You are allowed to arrange the order of counters and events you use on an attack in any way so you choose. So just to give you an example, let's say this is your hand and you have 1 Dawn under your Croc, so your ability's live, and then you have a Love Mellow. So let's say they attack you for 7, you can go discard with X-Drake. Now you have 4 cards in hand. Use Love. You will draw off the effect of Love first, so we get 1 card. Then we use our leader ability because we now have 4 cards, so we'll get a 2nd card. Whereas if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't be able to draw the card. And likewise, if you have a Desert Spada, always use your Desert Spada first, because if you have these 2 cards, then that means that you're going to be able to rearrange the top 3 of your deck. And let's say you have 5 cards in hand once again, then you rearranged, you didn't use the effect of your leader to draw off of this, because now you're going to use this and you're going to draw off of your Love first, and then you're going to draw off of your leader. Whereas if you chose to draw off of your Spada, then you wouldn't get to draw 2 cards, because now you have 5 cards in hand once again, so your Love Beam won't be able to trigger. I decided to play 2 Blast Res standard, and the new addition to the deck, 1 copy of Lion's Threat Imperial Earthbind. This card is honestly really insane. The reason why I have it in the deck over a 4th Teach is because this card, the earliest you can use it is turn 3 when you're a 6 Dawn. If they play a Trafalgar Law on curve or a Queen, it's completely fine for you to get rid of it with this, because you're going to put 1 Dawn under this, and if you're drawing a card off of this and then you can draw one during the other guy's turn, you're essentially just mitigating the cost of this. And in the late game, this card is just free. And I think that 1 is very strong to have in the deck because we have Missile Sunday and it can reuse this effect. You'll get into a lot of situations where they'll have like a 5-cost blocker or a 4-cost, and you can't kill their cards that are giving them like infinite value. Let's say they have an Okiku, it's just tapping down your Uta or your Queen every turn. So this card just allows you to get rid of those. And I think that the cost is completely fine. I think that you just have to be very weary about when you use it. But overall, people aren't going to expect you have this. And it adds more choices, more options to our Missile Sunday, which more options in a deck like this that's very skill intensive is one of the best things you can have. Because my problem with 4 Teach was that Teach isn't good in every matchup. And sometimes like versus like blue, you just don't really have anything good to hit. Versus law, it's like, okay, you're just literally helping the guy. And like I said, the worst matchup with the deck is blue. if they have a Boa Hancock, sometimes this is the only way you can get rid of it, because this card just bypasses their other blockers, and they probably have like a 1-cost Law. They probably have an equal amount of cards in hand as you because they're not using any cards, so they have a Love Mellow that protects their guy. So a lot of times you just auto lose if you don't remove it with this. So I think this card is really strong, and I would consider upping it up to 2. That's going to be all for the deck list, guys. Stay tuned for a live stream eventually whenever I'm able to record some matches with the deck, or as well I may come out with a match video. We'll just see how that goes. I want to thank you all so much for reaching this far in the video. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys at the Dallas Treasure Cup. And as always, if it's not the slime, I don't got the time. Peace.
Ooh, is that indigo?